The Australian police have banned me from entering into my own city. If I choose to fly home, I could face a 1-year imprisonment. So far, I have had no success getting home, so I thought I'd put on this outfit to try and bring some attention to this injustice. So in this video, I'm going to explain how I got into this situation and why I need you to spread this message far and wide. So this whole situation began just over a month ago when I was due to leave Melbourne. Just a few days before I was due to fly out, the police came knocking on my door. This isn't the first time the police have come to my house to issue me with some kind of ban. This time I received a barring notice, which means I was banned from every liquor licensed venue in Western Australia. That includes pubs, restaurants, and any other place that sells alcohol. Anywhere that had a liquor license, I could not enter, otherwise I would face a trespass penalty of up to $12,000. They gave me this ban because I did a disruption in a restaurant. This protest was to highlight the atrocities in the fishing industry and get people to watch the documentary SEASPIRACY, which is highlighting what is happening in these evil industries that are mass murdering innocent beings as well as the planet. This is a complete misuse of the law, as I am a non-violent animal rights activist, and I was issued this barring notice on the basis of a non-violent protest that I did in a restaurant. So obviously the purpose of a barring notice is to ban drunk and disorderly people from entering liquor licensed venues. I don't drink myself and I'm not disorderly when I do my activism. I'm simply there to speak the truth and speak on behalf of the most oppressed beings on this planet. So it is completely unjust for this law to be used against me. This law was not made to apply to protesters, but they're using it as such. Now, I had planned my trip to Melbourne months before I received this barring notice. Contrary to what the media were reporting, I did not flee WA because of this barring notice. It just happened to coincide with my trip to Melbourne. On the day of when I received the barring notice, I put up a video on social media explaining what had happened. The media took quotes from my video and made it sound like I was permanently leaving Western Australia. A couple of weeks ago, before I was due to fly back into Perth, I applied for a permit to enter Western Australia because of COVID. So shortly after applying, my application came back to me and it said that I was rejected, and the reasoning was because I'm a non-WA resident. I thought this was a mistake because obviously I am a West Australian resident and I have been for just about my entire life. So I decided to redo the application, which was approved shortly after applying again. However, in less than 24 hours after a successful application, it was taken back away from me and came back again, rejected because I'm a non-WA resident. So I attempted to reapply again, this time providing an enormous amount of evidence to prove that I was a West Australian resident and that I urgently needed to return home because I had a court case and I needed to return to my business. I was met with a very bizarre response and again was rejected for being a non-WA resident. So in this email it says, "Rejected as a WA resident. Has publicly claimed she has left WA." So as I previously mentioned in this video, I never publicly claimed that I was leaving Western Australia for good, and this sergeant is appealing to a media news report to determine whether or not I am a West Australian resident, despite me providing several legal documents to show that I am in fact a resident of WA. He then continues to say, "In relation to your court hearing, this is only a charge of disorderly behaviour, and as the hearing notice states, the matter may be heard in your absence. Although it is possible for me to not be present for my court hearing, it massively disadvantages me and it would result in an unfair trial." And as a sergeant, he would be very well aware of that. He then goes on to say, "Your business appears to be online and it is not necessary to return to WA to continue this. I stated in my application that I needed to be home to run my business. I have a clothing business and all of my clothing that I sell is at my home address in Western Australia. Therefore, I cannot run my business from another state. I have a lot of pending national and international orders that I can't attend to because of this." He then goes on to come back to the point about me not being a West Australian resident, and he says here, "You are currently not being granted entry on WA resident grounds." And then he finishes off by saying, "Application rejected," all in uppercase letters. So to me, this sounds like a huge personal issue, and this person is using their own personal opinion on me to prevent me from coming back home. So this statement is clearly showing that the West Australian police are using anecdotal evidence over empirical evidence. They are choosing to follow a biased media article over legal documentation that I have provided to prove that I am a West Australian resident. And even regardless of my residency, on compassionate grounds, I should have been allowed to enter Western Australia because I had a court appearance. If I choose to return home, I could face a $50,000 fine or 12 months imprisonment. The law for this situation is ambiguous because it is so new. The police have been given a huge amount of discretionary power for this new legislation in the state of emergency. This is making it incredibly difficult for me to seek legal help and even dispute it. After a stressful few days of trying to get into contact with someone and missing my flight, 1 whole week later, I finally received a call from a police officer yesterday. This police officer admitted that the West Australian Police Force use media sources, including this article about me, to determine their decision making. That doesn't sound very professional to me. So the officer said to me that it is upon the processing teams to conduct some diligence to see what the connection is within Western Australia and whether or not people are being truthful in their applications. This is quite absurd to me that they are appealing to a misleading media source rather than legal documentation to show that I am a West Australian resident. If the police had done their research properly online, they would have found that months before I was due to leave to Melbourne, I publicly announced that I was coming here for a holiday to stay with Stefania. And even if I did publicly announce that I was leaving Western Australia, that is not enough evidence to prove that I am no longer a WA resident. How can a news article trump legal documentation? The officer then continued on to say to me that I needed to show more evidence of my current connection to Western Australia to substantiate that I am a West Australian resident returning. However, I said to him that I had provided several legal documents to prove my permanent residential address is in Western Australia. I have provided as much evidence as possible to show that I am a West Australian resident, and I shouldn't have to because the police have my home address in their system since they come to my home in Perth all the time. They very well know that I am a West Australian resident. So he then went on to explain that my application lacked information about my urgency to return home, despite providing thorough reasoning as to why I needed to return home. And I have now missed an important court date and my business can no longer run. At the beginning of this phone conversation with the officer, he said that he wasn't going to apologise because the police were simply doing their job. However, at the very end of the conversation, he said to me, "I apologise on behalf of the team. Those internal notes should have never been released to you, and that has been addressed." He said the media is inherently unreliable, so the weight of that needs to be tempered. Yeah, so this is quite unusual because he's making it out as if I should have never received that personal message from the sergeant, and maybe that information shouldn't have been disclosed to me because I was certainly shocked when I received that message. It was very unprofessional and very unusual, so this is sort of stating that that information shouldn't have even been sent to me. And obviously they're doing anything they can to stop me from entering Western Australia. So unfortunately, animal exploitation and suffering is so normalised in our world today that people simply don't understand why I am an animal rights activist and why I do what I do. And unfortunately, this is misinterpreted, especially because of the media, to make me out to be a serial pest and a public nuisance. And most people see me as the enemy. However, as I mentioned earlier, I am a non-violent protester, and my mission is simply to stop animal abuse and animal suffering. My mission is to end the animal holocaust. And as you can see from these examples, the system is trying to silence me from exposing the truth.